On this episode of the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast, we're going to be discussing the cryptically spiritual Moonbeam Levels. And joining me on this episode is Christy Norman from the Mountains and the Sea podcast.
Hi, it's great to be back.
So this is a song, originally we got Moonbeam Levels on the Forever Prince compilation. That was like the first compilation we received after his passing in late 2016. Well, his passing was in spring of 2016. We received Forever in like late 2016, maybe November. I forget exactly what month.
Yeah, that sounds right.
And this was sold as, or this collection was sold as, a greatest hits, but with also this bonus vault track. Mm-hmm. And Moonbeam Levels is the song that we got. It's a song that was recorded back in July of 1982, the day before Lady Cab Driver. For those of you who like digging into the Dwayne Tudall books and figuring out when did Prince write this and record this, and when did he write and record that. So this was the day after Lady Cab Driver, recorded in Sunset Sound in Hollywood. And I guess with this one, it was often cited as a potential 1999 album track. Ultimately, of course, it didn't get added to the 1999 album proper. We got it released again from the Super Deluxe edition of 1999 in 2019. Mm-hmm. So, Christy, when did you first hear it? Did you first hear it on Forever? Did you hear a bootlegged version prior to that?
I think I probably heard it on Forever. I know my husband, Josh, who's my co-host on the Mountains and the Sea, had heard many, many bootlegs of it. So he was very well familiar with it. I didn't hear it till Forever. But man, it's just a joy. It was worth buying Forever for this song. If that was the only thing that came on it, it would have been worth it.
Yeah, this is a great song, and it certainly is one of those vault songs that was well discussed, well known throughout the Prince community, Prince bootleg community for sure, for a very long time. And it kind of almost has like this mythical attributes around it until it was released. Like, ooh, Moonbeam Levels. I mean, the name of the song itself is just very like, what does that mean?
Yeah, cryptic.
Very cryptic, and it's still, even after we got the song, there's some cryptic aspects to the lyrics that we'll be kind of talking about on this episode for sure. Trying to parse through it and figure out, like, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to me? And maybe mean something else to, somebody else listening to the show, for sure.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you mentioned how well known it was, because back in 2013, there was a charity benefit at Carnegie Hall called The Music of Prince, and Elvis Costello played this song at that benefit. So it wasn't just well known, it was well enough known that Elvis Costello felt comfortable enough to go ahead and do a cover of it in public. Yeah.
Exactly. It's not like he was doing a cover of No Call You or
right.
or Vagina for that matter. It was Moonbeam Levels. This was a song that had enough name recognition and popularity in spite of its unreleased status. So that's a pretty cool thing, I guess. And it would be, being the very first vault song that we got after Prince's passing. So it has, it's up there for that reason as well, in terms of its notoriety. Mm-hmm. So this song had been, I guess, kicked around for years, obviously being recorded in July of 82 prior to the release of 1999. You have the very clear and obvious connections to that album. Some say that it was potentially going to be slotted and maybe where Free was ultimately added, as they both kind of are ballads. And even though they say very different things, they also have just kind of a general feeling about them, where they speak to more internal struggles. And maybe some of the world around you, and how do you relate to the world around you internally. Had you heard that, Christy, that maybe this was potentially slotted into a free, ended up going?
Right. And when we covered Super Deluxe, Josh said he would have actually preferred Moonbeam Levels to free in that slot. I don't really have an opinion either way. I like both of them. But I also read that there was an undated synopsis found after Prince's passing of Purple Rain, and this was one of the songs listed for that. So he had lots of ideas where it might be used. Maybe 1999, maybe Purple Rain. I read it was for the 80s versions of Crystal Ball and Raven to the Joy Fantastic. Those projects both disappeared. This was a song that was considered for both of those albums. So it wasn't a song that he didn't think deserved a home. It just never quite found one.
Yeah. There's definitely songs in his catalog that he felt were strong enough or had enough potential impact to be worthy of carrying with him year after year and with each of his prospective projects. But yeah, just again, never found a home. Crystal Ball is another one of those songs, never found a home. And even though they never found a home, and there's certainly other ones that I know I'm forgetting, they still, I think with each passing year, that being discussed and rumored to be on a potential album, and then never making the album, just kind of added to its infamy, I suppose.
Yeah, the mystique.
Exactly, yes. The mystique around this song that Prince must have really enjoyed and liked, or thought it was valuable enough again to provide and to give to the rest of us. Let's see, what else do I want to talk about Moonbeam Levels? I guess another thing about this song that it's not really that relevant, but it's kind of an interesting thing, is that this was often misnamed as A Better Place to Die when it was being bootlegged, because again, we didn't have any kind of official lyric sheet to go with it. We had no official recording information, so like he says A Better Place to Die a lot in the song, so hey, maybe that's the name of the song. People are just grasping.
Yeah, it would make sense. Well, because what is a moonbeam level? It's not like you hear that and it's such a common phrase that you automatically know what it is. It's it's unusual. Yeah,
and the song itself has kind of like this spacey, futuristic feel to it.
Very 1999 era.
Exactly. That's exactly where I was going, because there was certain songs on that album that had a very similar sound to it. The way he would use his, the samples and his keyboard, and then the LM1 drum machine. It's all right there. Something in the Water, Automatic are two songs that spring to mind when I think of like that futuristic sound that he was toying with. And even like the exhaust sound that comes out early in this song, or that you hear early in the song, there's that similar sound in Automatic as well. All right, so this song's lyrics, I think what I want to do on this one is kind of talk a little bit about the general feeling of the song, how we interpret the song, because this song, as we used the word cryptic a few times already, but it's fitting because I've heard the song a lot now, but the few times I'd heard it prior to it being released, I didn't spend a lot of time with the lyrics. I was just mostly listening to it just as a song with music, and I understood the chorus. I knew what he was saying, but what was he really saying? And that's where I wasn't quite as clear to me. It didn't come to me immediately like some songs do. Like, oh, this song's about that.
Right.
This is a song that I had to like digest a bit, like a meal. I had to digest it for a while before I could finally, figure out what it meant to me, or what I think potentially the meanings, some logical meanings of the song are. Because again, Moonbeam Levels is not a phrase that's common in our vernacular. It is not a phrase that you hear people say. It wasn't a phrase in the 80s either, so it's not just like, oh, it must have been an 80s thing.
Nope.
Nope.
Nope, it was a Prince thing.
It was
not an 80s thing.
It's very much a Prince thing. Okay, so the first verse of the song, I get the feeling that he's kind of talking a little bit about, he's trying to tell a story a little bit, I suppose,
I
and
agree.
he's trying to present the listener a bit of a like a setup. Like if it was a movie or a book, this would be the opening paragraph, like trying to set the scene. And it's very poetic. Yesterday I tried to write a novel, but I didn't know where to begin, so I laid down in the grass trying to feel the world turn.
Oh.
Those are very poetic lines, and they evoke a lot of imagery. I get imagery of somebody who is, well, when he says lay down in the grass, I mean, you have a very clear image of somebody laying down, their back maybe on the ground, looking up at the sky, and assume it's either a warm day or a warm night. Doesn't really say for sure if it's day or night.
I always pictured it as day. I don't know why.
Yeah,
maybe because he said I tried to write. Oh well, yesterday. I don't know. I just always pictured it as like a beautiful, warm, sunny sort of day that'd be pleasant in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I mean, that's where my mind goes too, because most of the time when people are laying down in the grass, it's probably in the daytime, just because that's the warmest part of the day and you're outside and you're kind of exposed. But, if it's night in summer, you could still be laying down and be okay. It's just a matter of, where you're coming from with those lines. And then the second half of that verse, boy loses girl in a rainstorm, nuclear World War III, and all that's left is pain and sorrow as far as he's concerned. So the two halves of that verse are very different. Like they give very different feelings. First half, kind of warm. You get a sense of somebody who's a little bit at peace. But then the second half, he just pulls the rug out from underneath us with these lines about losing a girl and World War III and pain and sorrow. What do you agree with that, or do you think that it's just setting it up for that kind of big ending?
Yeah, I don't know that I would call him at peace laying in the grass, because when he's trying to feel the world turn, like everything seems real static, but maybe not in a good way. Like he's trying to find, literally grounding himself, literally laying on the ground and trying to have a connection with nature and creativity and, whatever, God or whatever it might be, a muse of some kind. So that if he's trying to do something, he doesn't know where to start. It almost feels lost, but not in such an anxious way to me. Mm-hmm. And that he would go to this pain and sorrow place didn't feel like a big disparity to me. Wasn't a big surprise.
Gotcha. Yeah. I mean, I guess with the line where I didn't know where to begin, it does kind of give off the impression that he's struggling with something, like he's grasping with some deeper thought that he's really kind of struggling with. I can't, like, if he's trying to write a novel, and I also think maybe write a novel could be like anything, like he's writing a poem or writing in his diary or just something.
A novel in a day. I tried to write one yesterday. A novel's usually like a book and takes more than a day.
Years for some people. Yeah. No, I mean, but Prince was very prolific, so I guess he was probably thinking, I could probably write a novel in a day, right? If I can write an album in a day, practically, I could write a novel in a day.
Sure.
Wouldn't be that hard. Yeah, so that's assuming that we're taking the word novel at face value and literally. I guess, you can take it to mean a lot of different things too, I suppose.
I kind of take it to mean that the overarching story is fictional. Even if it speaks to us, it's not a first-hand account of something that really happened, because novels are by nature fictional.
Yeah, that's actually a good an astute observation, because unlike a lot of Prince songs that seem very first person, or they're coming from personal experience, and sometimes in this show I'll say, like, Prince says this and Prince says that. Well, yes, he says it, but is it coming from Prince? From his perspective? This song, to me at least, clearly or seemingly comes from a third person. Like he's telling a story about somebody else that's removed from him. So like almost like he's narrating, or if he's speaking in third person. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, but that is certainly the kind of feeling I get. I get less of a feeling this is Prince talking versus this is somebody talking.
This is the story he's telling us rather than this is his personal experience. Now, that's not to say that some of these feelings or emotions that are coming through this are not his, because I think it would be difficult to say that any person couldn't feel this range of emotions. He's probably felt them at some point, but maybe not in this exact way. Obviously not, because, we haven't been through World War III and Armageddon.
Yeah, exactly. And so, like most songwriters or most novelists or most screenwriters or whatever, they pull a bit from personal experience or personal feelings, aspects of their life that they can then embellish a bit, or maybe a thought they had for a day, but they're taking it, to the next level and what would happen if I was like this all the time, or if I took this thought and followed it down this path or acted on it. And that's what, the creative parts of people's brains do, is they take a little aspect of their thought processes that most of us just kind of dismiss, but then they create something out of it, and they expand on it in a very artistic way. And I think that could be what he's doing here as well. And another reason why that I think that's probably true is because there's themes in the song that we hear throughout 1999. Nuclear World War III, right there in the first verse, he's talking about basically the annihilation of the human race.
Right.
Or at least the impending annihilation of the human race. He certainly lost somebody. Boy loses girl in a rainstorm is supposed to tell us that he lost somebody near and dear to him, which has left him pain and sorrow, and he's blaming this nuclear World War III for that. Well, hello, 1999, the song itself is very much of that theme as well. Let's party in the face of World War III, versus this song is more, boy, this being on this earth sucks right now. This is a crappy place to live.
Let's go get a condo overlooking the rings of Saturn.
Yes, he definitely goes there. And he's talking about a different world in trying to, I think, leave this world. Whether or not people interpret that to mean suicide, or they just, it's just a wish that he has. Like he wishes he could go find a different place to live, maybe a place that isn't so screwed up. Do you have any thoughts either way, Christy, on whether or not you take this song to be more of a song about a guy who's maybe suicidal, or just somebody who's just kind of down in the dumps and depressed about what's going on around him?
I think you could definitely read it either way. I don't think he's really suicidal. When we get to that close to the end where he says he doesn't really want to die, but we've all had those times when you've had a physical or emotional ailment where you're just like, I wish I would just die. You're not suicidal, but you're just like, boy, I just need a break from this world. You don't really mean it, but that's kind of how you feel in the moment. And that's kind of how I interpret this, though knowing that it's sort of this fictional story and it's World War III, suggesting a future sort of timeline. I kind of love to think about the idea that perhaps it is a time in the future where a condo overlooking the rings of Saturn is possible. It's more fun for me to think about it that way. Whereas like he's lost this girl he planned to spend his whole life on Earth, and now there's World War III, and what is there left here? Yeah. Maybe I'll go somewhere else.
Yeah, and that's interesting because, again, if you're thinking of the song as taking place in some distant future, then some of these things that he says in the song, where he says maybe he's looking for a different world, like you said, nice condo overlooking the rings of Saturn. Maybe that is not so fanciful. Maybe that is not such an abstract idea. Maybe that's in this fictional world that Prince is creating here in the song. That's a potential reality. Like he just needs to hop on, the latest SpaceX rocket and take off for Saturn, because Earth is, everybody on Earth is, basically killing each other, killing themselves. Talks about living a plastic life. Maybe he wants affection instead of a plastic life. Maybe at this point in the narrator's life, they're just feeling like everything on Earth is just too plastic, and that could be literally like pollution,
right?
Oceans filled with plastic, or it could be looked at as just a stand-in for materialism. Everybody's fake. They just want the latest and greatest. So you could look at it a couple different ways.
Yes, I think it's all true. I think it all it all works. It's literal and it's not. Exactly. Every bit of this poem is both literal and not.
Right, because obviously in 1982 nobody was traveling to Saturn.
Right.
I mean, we still not traveling to Saturn in 2023, and as far as I know, Saturn is an inhabitable planet. So I'm not sure that
I don't think so, but I think there's talk of like Titan or some of the moons. Saturn's not inhabitable because it's gas giant, but some of the moons, maybe someday.
Yeah, maybe someday.
If we make it that far.
It seems pretty far away from the sun, but maybe. Maybe. But anyway, so even in 1982, if we weren't really traveling to different planets, human beings weren't, at least, there's the idea that this person, the narrator of the song, the narrator of the story, is just expressing, tired of being on Earth. And what do they know? They don't know any other galaxies or any other planets, so he's going to pick out another planet in the galaxy that he knows. Saturn. Could have replaced that with Mars, could have replaced it with Jupiter or Uranus or whatever. Pick Saturn because Saturn, is kind of, it's the planet with the rings, and everybody kind of has it's a pretty, you have a visual connection to it because of what we were taught and how it looks in school. So I get it why he picked Saturn to represent just kind of an alternate place outside of the planet that we're currently on. So yeah, the whole aspect of the second verse where he's talking about maybe he's looking for a different world, maybe he's looking for a brand new high, maybe he would like a nice condo, that just adds obvious credence to the theory that this is a song that is more of a story song that is written about a person that's not Prince, not the person singing the song. He's telling a story. The line "looking for a brand new high" is interesting, just mainly because he's been talking a little bit about high, like getting high, around this time. Purple Music, a song that he wrote just a little bit before this, is talking about how Purple Music gets him high. He doesn't need cocaine or reefer to get high. Purple Music does it for him. And then in All the Critics Love You in New York, he talks about we need a purple high. So he's talking, basically that's just standing saying, like, instead of the chemical highs that we normally indulge in, he's thinking or saying that, music is his high, or music is his drug of choice. And here he's looking for a brand new high, potentially meaning, could be, standing for Purple Music, or it could just be like anything else that's going to make him euphoric.
Right.
Yeah, beyond what is in front of him or what's available to him.
Agreed.
So one thing we haven't talked about is the chorus. So the chorus is very short and sweet. So each of the verses, he kind of ends. So he says, "Please send all your moonbeam levels to me." And he repeats that, and he ends it with, "I'm looking for a better place to die." So I think one of the things that, I wouldn't say perplexes, but it certainly is less obvious, than some of his other songs. But Prince was pretty good at writing songs with less obvious titles or choruses.
Mm-hmm.
Did we really all understand exactly what he was referring to in the chorus of Purple Rain? I just want to see you dancing in the purple rain. Maybe not. Maybe not right away, for sure. I didn't as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Did I know exactly what he meant by Little Red Corvette? Baby, you're much too fast.
I hope not in the 80s. Hope you didn't know. You were a kid.
No, not as an 8-year-old in 1983, I didn't. So I guess if you think of it that way, it's not that unusual for Prince to give us a chorus that maybe has some cryptic nature to it, where you have to think about it a little bit, or you kind of wonder what is he really referring to. So Moonbeam Levels, let's just, at least we have to talk about what we think that it means to us. We'd be doing the episode a disservice if we didn't.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Well, I think it's just...
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it's just like, the good juju. Like, it's the good thoughts, the positive feelings. I mean, I guess technically it could be coordinates to another location, but that seems, even within this whole realm, a little far-fetched. But it's more like positive thoughts and experiences is how I see it.
Yeah, that absolutely works for me too. And I did want to throw out there that, because we've been toying with this so far on this episode, is that there's literal meanings and then there's metaphorical meanings throughout this entire song, where there's potential literal meanings, like he literally wants to leave Earth, like he wants to be lifted up into the atmosphere and taken off of the planet and try to find a life somewhere else. That's the literal meaning of like a lot of these lines. Then there's the metaphorical, like I just want out, like this Earth sucks. Take me away. And this is where your interpretation of Moonbeam Levels makes sense, because he's like, take me away, meaning like I just need something to kind of bring me out of these doldrums, bring me away from the funk I'm in, or from the depression that I'm in, or give me some meaning, help me find some meaning in my life here on this planet that I'm stuck in. And maybe these Moonbeam Levels that he's asking, I don't know, from just the heavens or from anybody, just some sort of sign, and he doesn't really even care who gives it to him, just anything, that works. But if you then go back to the potential literal, you could look at Moonbeam Levels to almost be like, beam me up, like beam me off, and like take me away, like physically take me away and transport me somewhere else.
Away from a world that's willing to have World War III.
Yes, exactly. A place where maybe people are good to one another and there's more love than hate. When he says, I'm looking for a better place to die, that line is a pretty important line in the song, because as we'll get through it, kind of changes his stance. The narrator changes his stance on what he's trying to say here. Like early on in the song, I get at least like even if he's not suicidal, he's maybe thinking like, I don't want to die here. Like this planet is going to hell, literally and figuratively, and I don't want to die here. I don't want to die like my girlfriend that,
right.
That I referred to in the first verse. I would rather die somewhere beautiful, somewhere amongst other people that, feel the same way I do, or where there's love instead of hate, like I said before. I'm looking for a better place to die. And that doesn't necessarily even mean I want to die tomorrow, but I'm going to die eventually, right? Like everybody dies. I don't want it to be here. I don't want it to be in this emotional state that I'm in.
Yeah.
Or I don't want it to be in this physical place that I'm in. So
yes, both.
Could be either way. Yeah, exactly.
It's both.
There's no definitive. This is one of the. I mean, I don't think that there's definitive kind of explanations for really any of Prince's music, because we didn't write it. But this is one of those songs where somebody else could come up with a theory, and I'd be like, yeah, of course.
That makes so much sense. I never thought of it like that before. Yeah.
And it means that because that's what you think it means. And that's all we're doing is just kind of explaining what you and I think this song means, because Prince wrote it in a way, I think, that you can take it so many different ways and it can mean a lot of different things to you.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's short and sweet, and it's very memorable. He says it, it's like this big moment in the song, like it has a very more traditional pop structure in terms of the writing. Unlike a song like Purple Music, which I recorded an episode of on that not that long ago, which is much more abstract, much more avant-garde. This song could have, I say this about so many Prince songs, it almost becomes cliche. This song could have been a hit.
It could have, though.
It does. It has that feeling to it. It has a very bombastic, but in a good way, like pop songwriting structure and power ballad type approach and feel. So in the verse where he talks about a newborn child, knows nothing of destruction, knows nothing of love and hate. What happens in between is a mystery because we don't give a damn about his fate. Do you have any thoughts about that particular verse or what it's trying to say, Christy?
I think it's sort of akin to like when he tells young people that they don't have to go fight somebody else's war. It's kind of a similar feeling, except he's saying so much instead of you don't have to go and fight their war. It's these people don't care about this baby who is innocent. These innocent people that are going to suffer from their decisions, be that war, which he explicitly says World War III. So there's a real lack of caring by the people who are making decisions. And I think that that's a kind of a theme he's visited before in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I get the very, very similar kind of ideas and thoughts from this. And I guess it's really in the song, it's more like the bridge. I called it a verse, but it's really like the bridge when I think about how it's structured. But anyway, yeah, innocence of the children. We're all born innocent, and he's really trying to express like children don't know the world that they've been born into. They don't know what's going on around them. And you and I'm sure can attest to a lot of some really awful things that were happening when we were children in the world, and we were just oblivious to it.
Right.
Either because we were shielded from it from our parents, or it was just, I didn't sit down and watch the 5 o'clock news when I was 7. I wasn't that interested. I'd rather watch cartoons. State of affairs just didn't really affect me much.
Okay, so I was shocked when I found out Chernobyl happened when it did, because I remember nothing of it. It was like 1986 or 1987, and I didn't remember any of it, like, at all. I always heard Chernobyl, like, by the time I got to be a teenager and thought it had been decades ago, and I'm like, oh no, that was in your lifetime. So absolutely, the kids don't know. They don't understand. They don't. Either you're shielded from it, or like you said, or we're just not paying attention.
Not paying attention, yeah. That's a big part of it too.
Yeah.
And unless you're being told about it by adults in your life, whether it's teachers or parents or grandparents or older siblings, if you're not being explained what's going on, like they don't set you aside and tell you what's going on, a lot of that stuff is going to pass most children by. And then the whole nothing of love and hate, what happens in between is a mystery because we don't give a damn about his fate. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, there's these adults that then are in charge of these children's fates. And what happens in between being a child and becoming an adult is a mystery because they're kind of like in that in-between. They don't go from being a child to being an adult without maturing and growing and being in some ways indoctrinated by the adults around them and learn behaviors. And this has been proven so many times where children aren't born racist. They're not born sexist. They're not born hating other people. Like, that's just not who we are as human beings. All of that is learned behavior. And it's frustrating knowing that it can be unlearned or we could have a society where we loved each other more than hated each other, but it's the adults that are messing it up.
Mm-hmm.
It's us that are completely screwing this up for our children. And yeah, I mean, there's so many people on this earth. It's really impossible to, unfortunately, it's impossible, I think, to assume that everybody in a generation that has children is going to decide collectively, we're not going to teach hate anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice, though? We don't give a damn about his fate, is what he's saying.
Right.
We don't really care what happens to the children in between because it's too late for us in many cases as adults. We've already learned our behaviors, and not to say people can't change. I do believe people can change, but it's the older you get, the harder it is, and we all know that.
That's fair.
All right, so as we get towards the end of the song, we start to get the narrator starts to reflect a little bit differently and express some different thoughts in the song. He said he'll never keep diaries to learn from his mistakes, so instead he'll just repeat all the good things that he's done, fight for perfect love until it's perfect love he makes. When he's happy, then his battle will be won. And then he repeats please send all your moonbeam levels to me. I'm looking for a better place to die. But then as the song kind of ends, he repeats, he don't really want to die. He don't really want to die. And this definitely goes back and adds weight to your comment before, like this person saying, I'm looking for a better place to die. And yes, it could be interpreted as somebody kind of on the edge, contemplating suicide, or at least the thought is going on in their brain. Maybe it's just in the beginning stages of that. But as the song goes on, he starts to realize, I think, that there's still love to be given here on earth. There's still things that he can do to make his world a better place. And he's not quite ready to give up, whether or not that means give up, again, his own life, or give up living on earth. Again, if it's the literal meaning, like I think I'll stick around.
Right.
I don't need to check out those condos and the rings of Saturn quite yet. There's still work for me to do. Is that kind of what you get, or do you get something different?
Yes. I mean, I would say generally, I would agree with all of that. I think it's interesting that he's won't keep diaries to learn from his mistakes, but he'll just repeat the good things that he's done. So he is learning from his mistakes, even if he's not writing it down. But I would say if you benefit from writing things down, like your to-do list or whatever, it might be beneficial to go ahead and write down even your mistakes, because what if your mistake is just one little twist away from being something good? You can't repeat that good thing unless you've learned from your bad thing. It was just a thought. It seemed a little juvenile, I think, to say I'm not going to learn from my mistakes. I'm just going to keep doing the right thing. Well, the right thing can be harder to identify if you don't know what your mistakes were.
Yeah, that line is kind of interesting, because I think there's the thought that documenting human follies and the mistakes that we make are how we learn.
Sure.
How future generations are supposed to learn, because the people who didn't live through it, how can they know what mistakes our generations have made in 100 years if it's not documented to explain it?
Right.
And I think that's the general thought process behind documenting awful things that have gone on in our nation and world's history.
Sure.
Whether it's, the Holocaust, or if it's slavery, or, the various wars that we've fought throughout our world, and genocides, and having that be written history, like fact, this is what happened. The idea is to prevent that, like we're supposed to learn from it. And that's the general consensus, is that that's how we learn, is by documenting. But he's kind of saying something maybe slightly contradictory to that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he won't keep diaries to learn from his mistakes. So I guess maybe you could think of it from the standpoint that, or just a potential way of thinking, alternate way of thinking of that, is he's not wanting to dwell on it, maybe?
Sure.
Dwell on his mistakes.
Well, because
by
that's
writing
painful.
Them down. Yeah, it's painful to dwell on mistakes.
Helpful, but painful.
It's certainly painful. It's painful, especially like if you're reading a history book and you were, a part of that, those people that were persecuted, that were harmed,
mm-hmm.
or whatever. It's painful to read that history, I'm sure. Just like it would be painful for anybody who's keeping a diary, because he refers to it as a diary, to go back and read the pages of your diary that were talking about the loss of your girlfriend, or, all of the death and destruction around you, or even the thoughts that you had. Like, diaries are supposed to be where you put your deepest, darkest thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
And if I spent, the better part of a year or a month or even a week in a really dark place, documenting all of these dark thoughts in my diary, would I want to revisit that very often,
mm-hmm.
especially if I'm no longer in that place? I personally wouldn't. I mean, if anything, that might bring me back into a dark corner. So maybe that's what he's trying to say. I don't know.
Sure, that's fine. But then he goes on to say, when he's happy, then his battle will be won. And I thought, this is a very young Prince. Because, as you grow older, you learn that happy isn't necessarily, it's an emotion. It's not really a state of being. It's a thing you feel. You can be overall happy, but it is an emotion and it comes and goes. And I think he learns this later, because in White Mansion on Emancipation, he talks about, he goes through these phases in that song where he talks about, when I have this, I'm going to be happy. I have this thing. Surely I'm going to be happy anytime now. And then I have all these things and more. I'm going to try and be happy. And he kind of realizes, he grows into that later to realize, that happiness isn't, it's a thing that we all seem to chase, but it's never anything you can hold in your hands for very long.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was just like, aw, sweet, young, innocent Prince singing about World War III. And still there's that innocence of he is going to find a way to hold on to happiness that the rest of us haven't found yet.
Yeah. He's fighting for that perfect love.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he finds it, he'll be happy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it's a nice sentiment. It's a nice way to end the song, more or less. But it is, as somebody as people who have experienced loss and love and all of the emotions that you cite, it's very fleeting. So yeah, you can be overall happy and have bad days. It's fine. It's right. Okay.
Yeah.
It's when the bad days outweigh the good days is when it starts to become more difficult and a challenge. Sure.
And you can still find joy in those days, but it's not a state of being. It is a part of being a human. Sometimes you're happy. Sometimes you are not. And it's just so very sweet and very innocent to have the idea that you can grab onto it and make it a permanent state when it's really not a possible situation.
For sure. Do you think the song ends on a uplifting note, Christy? Is that kind of what you get from it?
Overall, yes. It's a person in a dark place who can see that it might not always be a dark place. He thinks he's looking for a better place to die, maybe insinuating that sooner rather than later he'd prefer to die, but he doesn't really want to. So that it gives you hope.
Yeah.
I think the character feels hopeful.
Yeah, that's exactly what I get from it as well, is hopefulness. Even if the narrator understands that there's still major challenges ahead, he's going to, he says it right there, he's going to fight for it. So he's not willing to quite throw in the towel,
right.
Not quite ready to either take his own life or be whisked away to the heavens or to outer space.
Mm-hmm.
He's willing to fight. And that's the hopefulness, I think, that Prince was probably trying to convey, especially saying he doesn't really want to die, when he'd been saying throughout the entire song, looking for a better place to die.
Mm-hmm.
To say he doesn't really want to die, to me, that does, offer some hope for the narrator, that he's going to make it after all, that crazy kid.
Well, he's still able to see the beauty.
Yeah.
He can understand that those children don't deserve whatever it is that might be coming to them from the powers that be. He can understand that there is happiness to be chased, that even if he doesn't really want to go there, that the condos looking over the rings of Saturn are in themselves lovely. So there is beauty in this universe, and he can see it. He didn't really want to go. He doesn't really want to miss out on this beauty.
Yeah. I like that. Well, I think, do you have any other final thoughts on the song, or do you think we covered it all?
I have one final thought.
Okay.
That if the weather is nice and you're ever feeling a little down or lost, go lay down in the grass and look at the sky. It is actually really beautiful and calming, and a thing that, since I heard this song back in 2016, I have gone and done several times when I just had a day where I felt really out of sorts, and it was nice enough to go lay down and look at the sky. It is a lovely thing to do.
That's great advice. I don't think many of us do that as often as we should or could.
I mean, we often spend a lot of time indoors, and just getting outside, taking your dog for a walk, or just, going and spending a moment in the park and being still and quiet. It's refreshing.
And even when we are outdoors, a lot of times we're looking at our screens. Mm-hmm. I'm just as guilty as everybody else. So.
I understand. Me too.
Yeah. So that's wonderful advice. And saying this now in January, where I live, not so easy. But I definitely will remember to do that in a few months.
Sure. And possible. And I did it probably 3 days ago, because it's 84 degrees here today. So.
Jealous.
Yeah, talk to me in July when it's 110.
Yeah, you'll be laying down in your living room looking up at your ceiling where the air conditioner is on.
Can I look out the window?
Yeah, with air conditioning around me, please. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Christy. Well, again, thank you so much for being on the show.
It was my pleasure. It was a delight to be here.
Can you let everybody know what you're up to and where to find you?
Sure. You can find The Mountains and the Sea anywhere you get your podcasts. You can find us on Facebook, The Mountains and the Sea, a Prince podcast, or you can join us on Twitter at TMATS, TMATS podcast. So that's where you can find us every other week. Excellent. Generally.
Sounds good. Yeah. I'm sure my people who listen to my show know all about your show by now. So
same with yours.
Yeah, we got a little crossovers going on here.
That's right.
Appreciate it again. And this has been the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. You can find the show at pressrewind.net. And also I'm on Twitter, YouTube, and I'm back on Facebook and Instagram. So if you need to find my profiles on either of those platforms, I will put links to them in the show notes. Click them and like the pages again, because I did lose them all. Sucks, but it is what it is. Starting over from scratch. So come find me. And thanks again. Until next time, goodbye.